Hi, and welcome to the Major 11 Do's and Don'ts when doing business with an Egyptian. As young Canadians who aspire to strive in the business world, we must be aware of each other's cultural differences. Now, culture differs from various regions around the world, so we must first have an understanding of each other. This is in order to be collaborative, productive, and successful. So stay tuned for the major do's and don'ts when doing business with an Egyptian. Number 1 is the greeting. Egyptians don't really appreciate when you're too forward. What you should do is wait for them to initiate the greeting. Then you must use their title, followed by their surname, until told to do otherwise. If an Egyptian does not have a title, then you may call them Mr. or Miss. Talking to them in any other format may cause them to get very mad.
Yo, what's good, Yusuf?
What is this?
Hello, Mr. Hamza.
Greeting respectfully to an Egyptian is very important. This is because in Egypt, titles are said with pride and are a sign of stature. You want to get off on the right foot for your first impression. Then you can continue with your pitch. Section 2 is dress code. Despite the country's hot temperatures, most of the body must remain covered. Visitors are expected to follow an Egyptian standards. Pretty much don't wear any revealing tops or short pants. Also, do not wear traditional Egyptian clothing unless you are Egyptian, because it can be considered very offensive. This is important because you want to come off relatable, not disrespectful. Even though we say don't judge a book by its cover, we still do. Your counterpart viewing you well will work in your favor. This also enhances your influence on their decision. Section 3 is scheduling. Please be aware of an Egyptian's business schedules. A typical business day usually lasts from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is in the summer. In the winter, it usually lasts from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Also, make sure you're aware of who lives in Egypt and what religion they follow. In Egypt, about 90% of the people are Muslim. This means Friday is a holy day, and on this day, no business should be conducted. Also, be aware of when Ramadan is. Business hours are usually cut short around this time. So if you schedule a dinner around Ramadan, they're most likely not going to show up, and they'll think you're being insensitive.
Mr. Arkham, trying to link on Friday, fam? At 1:30? Hello, Mr. Arkham? Are you able to meet on Monday at around 10 a.m.?
Before doing business, you must at least have the opportunity to meet with your counterpart. It's also important because you want them to want to meet with you. Section 4 is punctuality. Punctuality in Egypt is not considered a main priority. Your counterpart might arrive a few minutes late, or hours, but make sure that you arrive on time yourself, just so that in case they do come on time, you don't disrespect them. Do not be angry if your counterpart is late. It's fairly common in Egypt.
Man, it's 12 o'clock. Where are these guys, bro? Waiting for 2 hours.
Mr.
Yo, where you been at, bro? It's been like 2 hours. I was waiting for so long.
What do you mean? This is a good time.
No, I told you meet at 10 o'clock. Look at the time. It's 12 o'clock.
It's only 2 hours.
No.
Mr. Z.
Oh, Mr.
Sorry, we're a
Arkham.
little late.
No, it's alright. It's fine.
Yeah, alright. Oh, so take seat. Let's talk business, my friend.
In Canada, our culture is to meet at least a few minutes before the business meeting. However, in Egypt, it's important to know that Egyptians are pretty loose with their punctuality. It's just part of their culture. The last thing you want is to offend your Egyptian. Number 5 are workplace values. The first of which being masculinity versus femininity. Egypt ranks partially high. In terms of business, they value a man more than they do a woman. Next is individualism. Egyptians value family very, very much. They are very collective, so they score very low on individualism. Egyptians score pretty highly when it comes to power distance. This means that the boss has a lot of authority over the worker, at least compared to Canada. Next is uncertainty avoidance. avoidance. Egyptians score very high at an 80 for uncertainty avoidance. They do not like to start confrontation. Lastly is long-term orientation. Egypt scores very, very low at a 7. This means that their country doesn't really plan for the future. So if you provide an opportunity that has a long-term effect, it can work in your favor. These are all important when you're doing business with an Egyptian. For example, with masculinity, you could send a man instead of a woman because they would respect him more and they would negotiate with him more. And with individualism, since they value family so much, show yourself as a family person, someone who cares about the team. And for power distance, show that you're strong, but not strong enough to overtake them. Show that you can control your workers, that you're not weak as a boss. This will give them more confidence in you and more faith in you. And for uncertainty avoidance, try not to talk about confrontational topics. For example, do not talk about Israel. That is a major trigger point for them, but we'll get to that later in dinner talk. Try not to ask them yes or no questions. Leave an open-ended question so that they can give their own answer of how they really feel. Number 6 is the meal plan. Since a majority of Egyptians are Muslim, make sure to bring your Egyptian to a place where there is non-alcoholic beverages and halal food. Since Egyptians take their food very seriously, it's seen as very disrespectful if you put salt on it.
Oh yeah, I'd like to have some pork and maybe some wine on the side.
Pork and wine? What is this guy doing? Is he crazy?
Can I have the halal menu for me and my guests over here?
Oh, very good choice, Mr. Aziz.
Good choice, good choice.
In Canada, we have business meetings at an office. However, in Egypt, they usually have them at restaurants. Not knowing these offenses mentioned can really strike a nerve with an Egyptian. This is because their dietary needs have a relation with the religion. And Egyptians take their religion very, very seriously. It's essential that you do not disrespect an Egyptian's religion. And to do this, you must plan a meal that accommodates their belief. Section 7 is conversation. When speaking with an Egyptian, remember to not be forceful. Remember, they do not like confrontation. Also, don't think that you can pull one over on an Egyptian. They are typically very hard negotiators, and if you're forceful, that will turn them off even more. Try to avoid talking about any female members of their family. Do not bring up Israel as a topic.
Yo, I saw your wife at the grocery store the other day. How was she doing?
Don't talk about my family like that.
Oh, I just saw her.
No, this is not about culture.
Mr. Hamza, how was your family?
They're great, Mr. Aziz. How are yours?
They're doing good, they're doing good. What about yours, Mr. Arkan?
Oh, they're doing well. Thank you. I hope everyone's well for you too.
Yeah, it's doing good.
Also, remember, they talk very loud. They're Middle Eastern. So don't be startled when they do talk loud in the middle of your conversation. All it is showing that they're getting comfortable with you. So see that as a good sign.
واحد اثنين ثلاثة أربعة همزة.
Hey,
اثنين ثلاثة أربعة همزة.
As long as you speak comfortably and are not distant, you should grow to be friends very quickly. Your conversation is probably the most important part of your entire meeting. It determines whether you succeed in your deal or not. These do's and don'ts are essential because it can save you from entering any awkward or offensive topics. Section number 8 is body language. An Egyptian wants to feel comfortable with you and connected with you, so make sure that you make eye contact. Don't be alarmed if an Egyptian wants to hold your hand. Just know that means they are getting very comfortable with you and see you as one of them. You should accept this as a gesture of friendship. Don't worry, he's not falling in love with you. It's just a sign of friendship. Although it's unusual in Canada, it's very common in Egypt.
I like a scene like right there.
What are you pointing? What is this? What is all this?
Don't point because it's considered very rude. Same thing goes for thumbs up. Also, don't cross your legs because showing the bottom of your foot is considered offensive. Body language is a key part of your conversation. Being unaware of the culture's norms can change the entire meaning of what you're saying, even though it's unintentional. Number 9 is being convincing. Egyptians aren't the easiest negotiators, so they need a lot of research and evidence. It's definitely not a country where sometimes you can just go off on a limb and create a business deal just because you know the person. Don't be fooled by an Egyptian's need for friendship and business. They will not go with you just because you're their friend.
The deal's in the bag, bro. Like, we're all making money here. Like we're making like some next money.
Where are the charts and the information?
Nah, you don't need that stuff, bro. Like, trust me. Like, with me, you're set, bro.
No.
So look, over here we have like a graph explaining how the deal's gonna go like. And over here is the amount of money that's gonna be made. So we're each making a bunch of money, and overall it's just gonna be a good deal.
Good work. I like the charts and the information on this.
Knowing how to be convincing in other cultures is extremely important. In Canada, it's being funny and being persuasive. But in Egypt, you cannot just wing a presentation. Decisions are strictly based on friendship, facts, and research. What I'm saying is different approaches are effective in different cultures. Since you're pitching to an Egyptian, provide all the information the Egyptian needs. Number 10 is language. In Canada, we speak both English and French, so all of our business cards have English on them. Remember that you are going to Egypt, and there they speak Arabic. Don't print a business card that only has English. Print a business card that has both English and Arab on it. Also be mindful that in Egypt they have a different way of documenting. In Canada, we use Gregorian. In Egypt, they use Hijra. Make sure to not only have your business cards translated, but also all your documents. Language is fundamental because how can you even consider doing business with a person when you don't understand their contact information, research, or documents? Since we've already established that Egyptians are big on research, there would be no chance of them doing business with you if they don't even know the research they're being presented with. Also, Egypt is a third world country. Their laws regarding workplace and safety are fairly loose. This is important to know because coming from Canada, where we are very strict on our laws surrounding work, if we are working in Egypt, we must adapt to their way of living. For example, in a situation where an Egyptian brings up a worker's right, in Canada, it may be a right. However, in Egypt, it might not be a right. I'm not saying that if in Egypt child labor is okay, that we should go along with it. However, other situations regarding break, for example, may be disputed between the Canadian and the Egyptian. Gift giving is a common practice in Egypt, but make sure you don't give them anything that will offend them, like this guy. Small electronic devices, chocolates, or compasses are popular gifts. Finally, number 11, and the most important, is to be friendly, be their friends. Due to Egypt's collectivism, they consider friendship and business to be very, very, very important. Remember to be friendly, not distant. In Canada, we tend to have a more distant attitude towards business. This is business, this is home. In Egypt, their business partners are their friends. This is very important to know because if you're distant and act the same way you would in Canada, you will not get anywhere with the Egyptian. Make sure you're open, accepting, and friendly. And again, let's go through the rules one more time. Greet them correctly. Dress modestly. Schedule at a time that's good for them. Don't get mad if they're late. Be aware of their workplace values and use it to your advantage. Be aware of their dietary needs. Be friendly in conversation. Use appropriate body language. Show evidence and research. Have everything written in English and Arabic. And essentially just become their friends. Follow all these tips we've talked about and the Egyptian will be completely impressed by the way you're immersing yourself in their culture. I hope you learned a lot from this and I hope that you're successful. Thank you.